All right, what's good, everybody? Welcome back to Chopping It Up with P. Scott. I'm Prescott Kelly. Today is Thursday, December 7th. Glad to have you back with us. Lots to get on the docket today. Make sure that you go ahead and put your comments in the chat, whether it be through StreamYard, through the Facebook Live, or through YouTube. You can find us at Chopping P. Scott on YouTube as well. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, hide your kids, hide your wives, as we are trying to dive a little bit deeper into the content that we can create for you guys. So, are the Jaguars in jeopardy of losing the AFC South? Are the Bills officially cooked and back to irrelevance in the AFC? We'll get to that. I know you guys think I'm a hater. Just hear me out. Caleb Williams, is he coming out? Is he not? Is his draft stock falling? We'll get into that. What the Bears should do with Justin Fields. Is Brock Purdy actually a real NFL MVP candidate? That and a whole lot more. And again, go ahead and drop those questions in the chat as well. And we'll get to you while we can. We don't want to interrupt the flow, but we also want to make sure that you guys, your voices are heard. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and YouTube again. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. So Trevor Lawrence has his high ankle sprain. And I feel like what Jacksonville is doing right now is they are trying to do the gamesmanship thing of, well, he's not really that hurt because he's questionable. What we end up seeing a lot in the NFL is when you have a designation of questionable, it gives you a huge leeway as far as how injured somebody actually is and their likeliness to play, because there's way too many. It's not just the game itself. There's way too much money when it comes to gambling and fantasy, daily sports fantasy. There's too much money involved in it. So when you designate the questionable to it, it's basically that you're almost basically saying without a shadow of a doubt, this guy isn't playing. So what Jacksonville's doing right now with Trevor Lawrence is they're saying that he's questionable. So there's the gamesmanship aspect of that. This is going to be worse than what people think, I believe. One, it's not even just the fact of the high ankle sprain, and you can see exactly how much in pain he was when he got injured last week in Cincinnati. There's the optics of just seeing how much pain he looked to be in. But even besides that, the high ankle sprain it's tough. That's a tough one to kind of navigate through. And you usually don't come back from that in 4 or 5 days. He didn't practice yesterday. This is usually the timeline. Today and Friday is when you're going to see if he practices today or tomorrow. There's a chance that he could play. But because Jacksonville is kind of protecting themselves with the caveat of he's questionable and not doubtful, they're not going to get a whole lot of backlash as far as, media-wise at least. It's when you start lying, because teams have been doing this forever. This is not a new tactic. It's not a new trait that coaches have just somewhat developed over the past 3 to 4 months, or anything like that. They've been trying to play the system of questionable versus doubtful, and how much heat can we kind of deflect. Now, there's not going to be any punitive damages. They're not going to lose draft picks or anything like that. But it does. If NFL coaches and owners and GMs are really trying to portray what they are trying to portray, we don't want that distraction around here, because that's what they always use. We don't want any distractions. But if you put doubtful on somebody and they play, it becomes a distraction for the following week. Not so much in that game, not so much in that time frame, but going forward, it's going to be a question that they answer. Owners won't have to unless you're Jerry Jones. But the coaches are going to. The players are going to have to. So you might as well just keep it as the questionable. What you're doing is all you're doing is just backing yourself. And this is pro sports. There's too much money involved to be able to not look past. We can't be that naive as fans, right? I feel like there's a naivety. I don't think I said that right. We can't be that naive. I'll simplify it down to that. We can't be so naive to think that coaches and players wouldn't say certain things to gain an advantage. Trevor Lawrence, to me, I feel like this injury is worse than it is. I obviously don't know. I haven't talked to the guy. I haven't talked to the Jaguars staff. But this feels like he's not going to play this week. The biggest issue that they're going to run into is they seem like they were a lock to win the AFC South. Jacksonville was. Now we're looking at the Colts are good. Houston's good. the stranglehold that it felt like Jacksonville originally had doesn't feel like it's going to be that case anymore. So it really depends on what the next couple weeks look like, because Jacksonville they have a 1-game lead on both Indianapolis and Houston. They all play in bad weather situations. I had the schedule up in front of me. I think Jacksonville plays. That's going to drive me nuts. Actually, I've got the schedule up right now. Bear with me for a moment. So the Colts play at the Bengals. Even though Burrow's out, that's not a gimme for the Colts. That's a bad weather game. The Jags are at the Browns, another bad weather game. And the Texans are at the Jets. So it's 3 good defenses with essentially, besides Houston, backup quarterbacks. If Jacksonville loses this game, all of a sudden, it really depends on what Houston does. Indianapolis, I don't know why, but I don't really trust the Indianapolis offense that much. Regardless, to be fair, Indy has done a really great job this year because Anthony Richardson went down super early in the year. Jonathan Taylor has been out in and out of the lineup and missed the first 4 weeks at 4 or 5 because of the injury reserve tag that was placed on him. Indianapolis has done a great job, but for whatever reason, and I can't explain why, I just don't really trust Indianapolis. Houston's kind of on that same realm. And it's not because I don't trust CJ Stroud. I like what he's done. And I also have said, I think that he should be in the discussion for MVP as we're talking like right now. But what's going to happen, and this is the only reason why I have a little bit of trepidation against Houston being able to catch Jacksonville and also being able to make the playoffs. This is the only thing. It's still season 1 for CJ Stroud. He's a rookie. Tank, who doesn't look like a tank, Dell, they're rookies. They're used to their season's already over. Playing at the college level, their season's over until bowl games happen. So you've got another 5 games and then the playoffs. The rookie wall is something that we don't talk about as much anymore. But like in the NBA, the rookie wall is absolutely a thing because you're playing twice as many games as you did in college. The NFL, it's not as many games by percentage, but it's still an additional like 2 months worth of just absolute, you're getting the absolute kicked out of you week after week. So it's different. It's not as many games, but it's still taking additional pounding for almost 2 more full months. So I don't know if Houston's going to hit that rookie wall or if CJ Stroud's going to, Tank Dell. I don't know. The experience matters to a degree. Jacksonville hasn't had a whole lot of success over the years. They had that huge comeback win against the Chargers last year. But is that enough to really say that you can trust them going forward? This is why I've always said, if you're giving me the opportunity to take Kansas City or the field, I'm taking Kansas City. It's been a long enough track record. I've seen Patrick Mahomes and that team, with or without Tyreek Hill, go to 6 straight AFC Championship games. They've been to 3 Super Bowls. That is, I know what I'm getting. Even with poor wide receiver play, I still know what I'm getting from number 15, number 87, and Andy Reid. So Kansas City, and especially that's the best defense that Kansas City's had in Patrick Mahomes' tenure. So I'm going to trust that more than I am Houston in the moment. Not to say that it can't happen, because that's the whole thing, right? Any given Sunday or Monday or Thursday or Friday if it's Black Friday, or Tuesday if it's a pandemic. Anything can happen on any given day, but that's the reason why there's odds as well. It's most likely not going to happen. Houston, for me, they can still make the playoffs, because when you look at the standings right now, and this is why I think that it's incredibly important for the Jaguars to win this next game, because this is what it looks like right now. The Dolphins are the 1 seed, Ravens are the 2, Chiefs are the 3, Jags are the 4, because those are your 4 division leaders. Then between Pittsburgh and the Bills, so there's another 6 teams. Steelers are 7-5, Browns are 7-5, Colts are 7-5, so are the Texans, and then the Broncos, Bengals, and Bills are all 6-6. Anything can happen, but it doesn't feel right to me. Jacksonville, I still think, has the upper hand just because of like that core has been together a little bit longer. On top of the fact that they do at least have some playoff experience with those guys. It doesn't mean they can't still lose that spot. But let me go ahead and over the chat because we actually got some people here. So Tank is out for the season, says Houston Sports State of the Union podcast. That's my dude, Nick Stevenson. So if you don't follow him, if you're a huge Houston sports fan, regardless of what it is, make sure that you follow Houston Sports State of the Union podcast. I didn't realize that Tank Dell was actually out for the remainder of the year. That's even more detrimental to Houston. I didn't realize that. So now Jacksonville really, if he's out, that's pretty much a done deal. Because he's been huge for them. But what Houston's been able to do is they've been able to they kind of pilfered two guys from Buffalo that are like real pros, the Devin Singletary and the Robert Woodses of that roster. Those guys I think are going to have a much bigger impact going forward now because that Tank Dell, I'm just kind of pivoting on the fly right now. But when it comes to those two guys in particular, Robert Woods is the pro. Devin Singletary wasn't even used in Buffalo, and it irritated the absolute hell out of me the way that they didn't use him. But Singletary was able to kind of carry the load for the Texans when Dameon Pierce was out. And Houston, and Nick Stevenson makes another great point, is that Jacksonville also holds the tiebreaker against Houston, because I think that Houston's lost to Jacksonville both times this year, I believe. But so Kyle Kindred says, Steelers, we need to rid ourselves of Pickett and we will be decent at best. Dude, the Steelers are infuriating to me. We'll get back on actual track of what the script is for the show pretty shortly. But with the Steelers, they're infuriating to me, man. Because the Bills have lost they're one game behind Pittsburgh as far as their record's concerned. But the point differential is like 140 different. The Bills have they're over 100 on the point differential. And I think that Pittsburgh has a negative point differential. I could have that incorrect. But either way, it's ridiculous, it's absurd, and it shouldn't happen. So when we're talking about like coach of the year, but Tomlin to me has to, because I don't think he's never had a losing season, but he's also never won coach of the year, which is kind of absurd. But when you think about them, and Kenny Pickett is actively playing defense against that offense, and they're still winning games. It's the most ridiculous thing that I think that I've seen in a long time, just given the record, the offensive production, and like that offense is constipated, man. Like they're backed up more than me after a Taco Bell visit. This isn't something that can be sustainable. And think that you're in that division specifically. It's just going to be out here. Kyle says we're out here having baseball scores. Kind of. Well, in this era of baseball, yeah. Houston Sports again says, I don't understand at all how Pittsburgh is ahead of Houston when they lost to Houston head-to-head. The only thing I can think of off the top of my head is that the conference record has to be better, because that's one of the big things with Buffalo is that their conference record, they've lost to the Jets, the Jets, Dolphins. No, they beat the Dolphins. I'll have to go. The Patriots. God, that Patriots loss was disgusting. Even the Chargers beat the Patriots. This is what I'll hit on Josh Allen a little bit later, but we'll get to it. The committee, Houston Sports. The committee, yeah. Linden comes in with the committee. But to get back on track, I got to get back on the script. You guys maybe get off. Let me get back on track real quick. So I do think the AFC South still kind of runs through Jacksonville, just because I do still trust the core better. The defenses play better. Indianapolis and Houston, because of the lack of continuity, and sometimes you just luck into wins. Luck sounds like a bad way to phrase this, which isn't what I'm trying to do. But we did this with the Giants last year, right? The Giants had a bunch of one-score victories. They can only get better. No, Daniel Jones is your quarterback and he's trash. We did with the Vikings. Like their point differential, like, every single game that they won was by like 4 points or less. That's not sustainable. The Raiders did it years ago. And that's always been my point, is When you have a track record of doing this, I have more faith in you. So to kind of pivot for a moment, the Eagles. The Eagles have done this 2 years in a row now. Now they got the doors beat off them by San Francisco, and they also lost to the Jets. But we can't do this transitive property of where you beat this team where you lost to this team, so they're automatically better than you. Because if that's what we're going to do, and I've seen a couple jokes in the chat so far about we need a committee for it. This to kind of change the narrative for a moment. TCU last year went to a national championship game. They beat Michigan. Michigan's been the playoff for 3 straight years and don't have a victory in the CFP. But they got beat by TCU, who mustered everything they could and beat Michigan. And then the season starts and you go from technically number 2 in the country to like number 14 or 15. Why is it the fact that, and this is why I was going to put this in the headliner, is FSU getting kind of backhand complimented by TCU from last year, where you won with the 3rd string quarterback. Ohio State won with Cardell Jones a number of years ago, but that didn't seem to matter. Michigan can't beat anybody in the playoffs, but we continue to allow them in. TCU outkicked their coverage. They were better than they should have been last year, but we let them in. And if we're just going to dumb this thing down and they lost by 70 to Michigan, that means that technically Michigan would have lost by 85 or 90, right? That isn't how this works. To quote J. Cole, that ain't how it works. That ain't how it goes. We got to stop doing this and dumbing it down to the lowest common denominator of if you beat this team, you can own, then you're better or you're worse than somebody else. That is not how this thing operates. So when I'm looking at even the CFP, I do think that Florida State should have been in. Undefeated, won your conference, Power 5. They did everything they were supposed to do. I'm not even a huge college football fan. But if you're going to do this for TCU last year, why can't you do it for FSU this year, who clearly have like real NFL players on their roster? It just seems like you're punishing Florida State for not having necessarily the same route as TCU. But we don't think you're that good because of your 3rd string quarterback. Well, I know it was a different time, but Cardell Jones got to win a national championship as well. Anyway, moving on so I can talk some smack about my Buffalo Bills. So, I'm not going to talk smack about the Bills, but I am going to do this. I've been reading over the past, 2 weeks or so after their loss to Philly, that they have essentially, like a 15% chance of making the playoffs. And after kind of talking it out loud in real time with everything that I just mentioned about these other teams, Cleveland has now Joe Flacco as their quarterback. Pittsburgh still has Kenny Pickett. The Colts, I still don't trust him. Houston, I don't trust him. And I certainly don't trust the Broncos. The Broncos have turned it around, but this always goes back to the point that I was making previously. You had a 4 or 5 game stretch where your turnover margin, you were like plus 14. You only had 4 or 5 turnovers and turned the ball over 15, 16, 17 times. That isn't what we've seen from Denver. Last year, Denver's defense was good. This year, they have not been, but they had a third of the season stretch where they looked competent. And now we're all of a sudden back on Denver. I personally am not. So the Bills, with having a 15% chance of making the playoffs, I can understand why some people will be optimistic if you're looking at it through the lens of what I just mentioned. Everybody, Cincinnati as well, they're technically behind Buffalo, but Joe Burrow's out. Browning balled out last week, but there's no tape on him. There's no guarantee he's going to put up another 350 yards, 3 touchdowns. Like, there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. We see these small sample sizes where a quarterback can get hot or they're not expecting what they're going to get from you, and you have some of these games. So Cincinnati, to me, they're still not in that class without Joe Burrow. I don't trust Denver. I don't trust Houston because of the rookie wall with CJ Stroud. If the next 2 or 3 weeks he still continues to do what he's done, all right, I might just have to throw that theory out the window. But right now, I'm going to stick with it. Same thing with Indy. Again, Cleveland has Joe Flacco and the Steelers still have Kenny Pickett. So if you're just looking at it in a vacuum of who's ahead of them and what their quarterback situation is and any other metric that you want to use, sure, Buffalo has a great chance of still making the playoffs. But then you think about, I don't have it 100% in front of me, but I remember they've got 5 games left. And what they're doing, not what they're doing, it's just the way the schedule played out. Buffalo is going on the road, at home, on the road, at home, on the road for the next 5 games. And they've got Kansas City this week. I believe they have Dallas at home. Then I think they have the Chargers at Los Angeles, the Patriots at home, and then the Dolphins on the road. They should beat the Patriots, but they've already lost them this year. So I'm not fully confident in that. But you got the Chiefs, the Chargers who can put up points, Dallas who they beat up on bad teams, and I don't think that Buffalo is bad. They're just not what we think they are, and there's a good chance that Miami could absolutely boat race Buffalo. You might have 2 wins. You might finish the season below 500 when you were supposed to be a Super Bowl caliber team. And I've been telling you guys forever, this isn't how it's going to work. Buffalo is not built this way. They're very top heavy on the outsides and in the middle. So what I mean by that is you've got Stephon Diggs, but you don't have a number 2 wide receiver. Gabe Davis is not a number 2 wide receiver. And I swear to God, if I have to hear from one more person that Gabe Davis is a number 2 wide receiver, if I ever see you in the streets, I will fight you. I am tired of him having 130 yards and 3 touchdowns or having 3 targets, 1 catch for 8 yards. He's not a number 2 wide receiver. And until they fix that, there's no chance that Buffalo is doing anything on the outside or just like on offense. Stephon Diggs on the outside, on the offensive side of the ball, Tre'Davious White on the outside, on the defensive side of the ball. Diggs has been healthy basically his entire career. Tre'Davious White over the past 3 years has not, and I love that dude. But they also have not addressed the secondary corner. They had Levi Wallace for years. People tell me he was good. I said, no, he's doo-doo butter, and he's constantly getting burned. He is like the poor man's Antonio Cromartie with a lot less offspring. That's the only way that I can equate Levi Wallace to anything. But they haven't been able to get a true number 2 wide receiver, and they haven't been able to get a true number 2 corner. And Tre'Davious is he's not done. He's not done playing football. But he's absolutely done being the top tier, top 5, top 10 corner that we've seen through his career. Not only that, and I'm not saying Buffalo is going to blow this thing up. I don't necessarily think that's the case. And before I do that, if you are watching live, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. I tongue twisted that because I don't do that. All right, we're back. We're back. No, don't nobody go nowhere. There we go. We're back. It's like 3 degrees here in Alaska right now, so I'm sure my things just kind of shut off for a moment. So that's going to have to be edited, which I don't want to do anymore. That's the whole reason why I do live stuff is I don't have to edit anymore. It's so tiresome being your own editor and producer and host and everything else. Anyway, back to what I was getting at. It's not necessarily the Bills have to blow everything up. But Stephon Diggs is going to be 30 coming up soon. Tre'Davious White with all the injuries. Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, they're all over 30, which doesn't necessarily in today's NFL mean that you're done, but it still is kind of the benchmark of you may not we may not see a huge precipitous drop in your production, but that's where it's going to start. It's kind of like the same thing with Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill's out of his mind right now and on pace for 2,000 yards. But are you really, like, just given the data over the course of just the NFL, are you willing to accept the fact that you think he's going to replicate it next year? Because I don't think so. He should still be productive, but I don't see this. I don't see him replicating this again. So it's kind of the same thing like with the Bills and their offense. Stephon Diggs is not going to be the same Stephon Diggs for much longer. You might have one more year of Poyer and Hyde. Maybe, but you haven't drafted replacements for them. You haven't got number 2 corner. Matt Milano got injured for the year. You let Terrell Edmonds go in free agency. Von Miller is about to be out. Leonard Floyd's having his best year right now, but even he has some mileage on him. The Bills, there's a good chance that this team could fall back into what they were before getting Josh Allen. And it's going to be really hard to dig yourself out of it. And it's not even just when anything can be rerouted. So with Miami, there's a chance that they could be really good for a long time. Tua is still young. But the thing is, they've got a number 2 when it comes to Jalen Waddle. And in the next couple of years, they're going to be looking for him to be the number 1 and then Tyreek Hill to kind of be the number 2, just because it's just age, it's numbers. That's how this operates. But they've replaced, not even a replacement. They got depth at a position of need, and they got a real stud in Jalen Waddle. Now, right now, I wouldn't call him a number 1 wide receiver, but if you give him a couple more years and some more continuity with Tua, there's a good chance that that's going to be the next QB WR1 combo that the NFL has to look at. But Miami addressed it, and they got it right. Buffalo hasn't been able to do that. When you look at the age of everybody on Buffalo on both sides of the ball, that team is in real trouble. If they don't absolutely smack the next 2 drafts, this team could go back to being a 5-11 team. Because I said it before and I'll say it again. We saw what Josh Allen was before Stephon Diggs. Then we got to see what he is once they got him. And everything changed. And they don't have another Stephon Diggs right now. And if you would like to have Josh Allen continue to be in this conversation, regardless of what you look at him as far as the turnovers, interceptable passes, I can live with most of those things. But if you don't have somebody you can trust on the outside, you're done. Like, he's going to revert back quicker. You're never going to see the Josh Allen of 2 years ago, I don't think, ever again. That was the ceiling of the ceiling for him. I also don't think you're going to see the bottom of the bottom in his first 2 years. But if all you're getting is some kind of median of those 2 versions, that's not good enough to win, especially if you don't have any real weaponry and your offensive line is still trash. The defensive line is still not good. AJ Epinesa balls out for 3 months and they take him out. Ed Oliver, and when I was talking about the how the Bills are constructed, outside, White and Diggs, great. But if one goes down, you're screwed. Same thing with Ed Oliver and Josh Allen, right down the middle of the field. One of those guys goes out, you're done. And I understand the starting quarterback and the franchise quarterback means something different. That's the most valuable position, which is this is what that award has to be now, to pivot for a moment. It's most valuable position. Just give it to quarterbacks, because that's all we're going to do anyways. Brock Purdy right now is the lead front runner for MVP. When 3 weeks ago, we thought he was trash because they were on a 3-game losing streak. This is how stupid we are as fans and just the media in general, that we want to put him in the top 5, then they lose 3, then he's trash, and then they win a few more games. They beat Philly, and now he's the front runner again. Stop it. And we'll get into that argument in just a moment. But before we do, we'll go ahead and hang back over to the chat for a moment. Ooh, that one was 12 minutes ago. I'm gonna bypass that one because I have no idea if that's even relevant anymore. But Bobby Otten, hey Bobby, what's going on, dog? I love that guy so much. He goes, as a Saints fan, I enjoyed Denver getting blown out. I don't like them getting it together. I still don't think that they've got it together. I just sometimes you go on those runs of you turn the ball over a lot on defense, you get a lot of turnovers, and your offense, for whatever reason. That's the thing too with Denver is everything seems to be short. I think that if I remember this, I could be incorrect on this, but if I remember right, Russell Wilson's still averaging less than like 205, 210 passing yards per game. So it's not like he's doing anything special. He's just not turning the ball over. And that's what the NFL has largely become now. It's not the same league. So when people do this thing with Josh Allen and Brett Favre, it's not the same NFL anymore. These coaches and these coordinators are so scared to do anything that might potentially turn the ball over. That's why everything is bubble screens, everything is slants, everything is running back and halfback screens and check down, check down, check down, check down. And then we might take the one stab over the top. But this isn't the same NFL that Brett Favre played in. So the comparisons to me, like it's not the same even brand of football. And not to say that this version's worse, it's just different. And to make those two calculated decisions, if you will, it doesn't make, they don't correlate in my perspective. But I'm just some dude in Alaska with a microphone. So let's hop back over to Lyndon. He goes, I do think that Miami has staying power. I do have to see how they draft coming up, and not just this season, but for a few seasons. I do see that them as a threat in the AFC because of how well that defense has played since Ramsey has come back. We'll see, and that's just it, man. Like, this is why I'm also not willing to say definitively that I know that Miami is going to be like the cream of the crop of the AFC East, much less like just even the conference, like that division itself. Is I haven't seen this ownership group with the coaching, with the players, do it for a few years and feel like I know that they're getting it right. There's certain organizations at certain positions where I trust and I don't trust. For the longest time, I trusted Bill Belichick with my life. Same with Tom Brady. But those two were simpatico. They were together. Now that Brady is gone, not now, it's been a few years, but the thing when Brady went to Tampa Bay and won a ring his first season there, that blew all of the math to holy hell and high water. That is where it became, it used to be Brady's only good because of Belichick. Why? Brady was a 6th round pick. There was 198 other teams who could have picked before him. Even the Patriots could have picked him multiple times and passed on him. That's the whole reason behind Brock Purdy it's the same argument. Who made who? It used to be Belichick's the guy, Brady's the product of the environment and what was going on. Then we see Brady leave. They struggle initially in Tampa. And then Brady says, I'm tired of trying to do it your way, Bruce. I'm going to do it my way. And like Frank Sinatra, everything worked out the way it was supposed to be, with them winning a championship. So now what we're seeing, but I always knew I could trust Bill to get defensive gems and get good offensive linemen, and somehow in free agency be able to get the guys that he needed. But he's never been able to draft position players, period. He's never been good at it. The best player he's ever had is Randy Moss, and that wasn't a draft pick. So, and you can argue Tom Brady, but I'm talking without the outlier. But yeah, so like with Miami, there is the possibility of them being atop the AFC East for a while is probably pretty strong. The Jets still don't have an offensive line. The Bills are old as hell. They're very top heavy. And the Patriots have so many holes to fill. It's not just Mac Jones, but it goes back to the poor drafting. Miami does. They have and it's not even necessarily because I trust Miami that much. It's because I don't trust the other 3 teams in that division. Miami could be the New England. New England was winning the division year after year after year, getting first round buys and having easy roads easy, in quotation marks, to AFC championship games, but that wasn't because they were that dominant. There were years that they were, but it was the ineptitude and the complete incompetence of the entire division for goddamn 20 years. So when Miami has the ability, I think, to be able to do that kind of New England type of run, but it's because currently they're set up so well. They're not going to do 20 years. I need people to not put words in my mouth with that. I'm not saying that the Dolphins are going to go on a 20, 25-year run, win 6 Super Bowls, and win like 19 division titles. That is not what I'm saying. But of that entire division of the AFC East, they are positioned the best, not even just for now, but for the next couple of years as well. I don't trust, even if New England, and y'all gotta be all over the place. Even if New England does get a guy like Drake May or Caleb Williams, if he slips, that team is far from, they're far from being able to turn this thing around. That New England's not going to be a playoff team for a number of years now. I remember last year, I had told people I still think that, or I guess this was 2 years ago, that I thought that the New England Patriots would still win the AFC East, and I got laughed out the building. Now they still didn't win the division, but they were 1 or 2 games off. That's when Buffalo won the division for the first time in God knows how long. But New England now, like they're so far back. Miami seems to be so far ahead, and the conference is just absurd. New England's going to have like some real come to Jesus moment where everything lines up and they just nail draft picks for the next like 3 drafts and free agency. I just don't see it happening. They've got a long way to go. Moving on to MVP talk. We got a little bit into this in the previous segment when it came to Brock Purdy and him being the NFL MVP, being the front runner, not even just in the conversation. But I want to tell you guys something that I learned last week. And like I said, what we need to do is we need to rename the MVP to not most valuable player, because that's not what we're doing. We're putting it to the most valuable position. And you can argue that because it's the most valuable position, that should always be the most valuable player. I don't subscribe to that rule. My argument has been Brock Purdy isn't even the best player on his own team. You could argue he's not even the 3rd best player on his own side of the football. We go to this hyperbolic take of you are the best. Well, the NBA does it this way. You're the best player on the team with the best record. The NFL has largely kind of dumbed it down to a similar type of thought process where if you're the quarterback of the team with the best record, then you're almost going to be guaranteed to get, or the thought process of like Mahomes, they don't always have the best record, but you just kind of like the eyeball test tells you that that's what the case is. So with San Francisco, it is something where you can make the argument he's not even the 3rd best player on his offensive side of the ball. You could argue that Trent Williams is more valuable. Christian McCaffrey, I think, leads the NFL in touchdowns this year. Like, that's not a quarterback. He's either 1 or 2. Debo, I don't believe, is the best player on that team, but he's definitely the most versatile. And the thing that I've been trying to put on people for a long time now is when it comes to San Francisco, they have a very certain way that they want to play. If those things don't work, if they don't have the Monstars with them, we saw what Brock Purdy was when he had to carry this team. And I layered this the other day because I did a live stream for like 10 or 12 minutes. Internet cut out again. But to kind of piggyback off of that take was Brock Purdy's a rookie last year. He was the last pick in the draft. So if you're asking me, do I expect, your 13th or 14th career start without Debo, without McCaffrey, and without Williams, that you look like you're not going to be very good for 3 weeks? Yeah, I can honestly say that's not even Mr. Irrelevant. That's any person who's starting in the NFL and has got a year and a half under the belt. Like that's going to happen. But when everything is perfect, he looks awesome. When everything is not, he doesn't, which is not an indictment on him. It's just how can you say he's the most valuable player when your most valuable players aren't playing and then you don't look the same? It's two completely different things. It needs to be renamed to most valuable position, which is just quarterback. And if you want to do it that way, you can. I just don't see it happening. And the thing that I I'm stumbling over my words now because it's the dumbest thing I saw basically all of last week. When we talk about the most valuable position, quarterback, Myles Garrett is considered one of the greatest defensive players that we have. It doesn't even just matter that he's a defensive end, linebacker, however you want to quantify him as. He's regarded as one of the best defensive players in football. And he had the exact same odds to win MVP as Josh Dobbs. That's what we put this thing down to. We can't keep doing this. I would like to think that we are smart enough as a society, that we are smart enough as football fans to say that Josh Dobbs is not an MVP candidate, and he sure as hell isn't just as deserving as Myles Garrett and what he does. All right, to wrap up this episode, unless we get some more things popping in through group chat, is what the Chicago Bears should do with Justin Fields. So one thing that I have been on for the past couple of years now is because now the Bears have had high draft capital, is going into this offseason, you have to figure out what you want to do with Justin Fields. One of two things has to happen. I am of the proponent of, if you think that he can replicate what he's been doing the last 4 to 5 weeks ish, and you get a guy like a Marvin Harrison Jr. or just another wideout, go ahead and keep Justin Fields and trade your number 1 overall pick because you still have more holes to fill. But don't overcomplicate it. I think that all too often what organizations try to do is they try to have too many permutations and combinations of what they should do. So with Chicago, I'm looking at this from the perspective of, and I don't want them to do what the Jets have done. What the Jets have been doing for years is the last 4 to 5 games, Zach Wilson looks good or Sam Darnold looks good. So we're going to give them another opportunity. And they keep playing themselves. I don't want Chicago to do that. But if you're looking at this from the perspective of you're going to have 2 crazy high draft picks, I'm looking at this from Justin Fields has played well, especially the past 3 to 4 weeks or so. If you believe in him, I think that you keep the draft pick or even trade it down because you do have more holes to fill on that team. You might still be able to get Marvin Harrison Jr. or another wide receiver. I don't know. But if you don't think that he's the guy, don't think twice about it. Draft a quarterback. Go ahead and reset the clock with a Caleb Williams or a Drake May, whoever you think is the best person. But just don't overthink it. Don't put yourself in this position where, well, if he wins this many games or if he throws for this many touchdowns, no, just throw all of that out the window. When this season ends, do you feel like you can win with Justin Fields? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, you move the pick, you get more players. If you don't think he is, draft a quarterback. Reset the rookie scale on him. Don't pay him. Trade him. Try to get some draft capital back. There's a team that's going to want Justin Fields. I like Atlanta, but any team that needs a quarterback with a good O-line and at least one solid weapon on the outside, you can probably move him for a second rounder, third, maybe like at the worst value. We saw Sam Darnold get traded. We saw Baker Mayfield. These guys are still in the league because they were the number 1 overall pick. They're top 10 picks. You're always going to have some type of value. Justin Fields still has a value based on contract, age, athletic ability. They're going to be able to get something back for Justin Fields. Where he goes is obviously going to the compensation is going to depend on what the surrounding case is, right? It's not really about what you're asking, it's what somebody is willing to pay for it. And that's just sales and economics 101. If I have something that you want, you might pay me more for it than somebody else because you actually need it. And if you're an organization who needs a quarterback who believes in him, you're going to overpay for somebody else who doesn't need him. But Chicago just needs to not try to outsmart themselves. Lay the groundwork. Can we win with him if we get another, I would say, wide receiver? DJ Moore can't be your only guy. I like Darnell Mooney enough, but that's not number two. That's a Buffalo Bill situation all over again. You get a true number two, beef up the offensive line, get another corner. Chicago has a lot of room to improve. But if you think you can do it with Justin Fields, move the pick, grab some assets in the draft. If you don't, pick your QB, cut your losses, and go ahead and move it along. Just keep it moving. Just keep it moving. Well, I want to say thank you guys for chopping it with P. Scott. That is going to be our show for the day. You guys can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can also find us on YouTube. We're trying to give you guys as many opportunities to watch and or listen to the show as possible. On Spotify, you can watch the live stream. Same thing with Apple. Or you can always just close the app and listen to it as well. I know that not everybody can keep their phone open or the computer open to be able to watch the live stream. But in any capacity that you can listen and or watch, please do like, share, subscribe, smash those 5-star reviews, and hide your kids. But tell your friends about hide your kids, hide your wives. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Stay up. Stay blessed.